Hello, everybody. This is Brendan, and welcome back to another bonus episode of Blowback Season 4. In this episode, you'll hear the full interview I did with Malalai Joya. Malalai, who became Afghanistan's youngest MP after the American invasion in 2001, lived through pretty much everything we've talked about in this season. During the Soviet-Afghan War, she lived in refugee camps across the border in Pakistan and had an early look at some of the more unsavory elements of the Mujahideen, which the Americans and their allies would go on to fund over everybody else. When the Taliban took over in the 1990s, she ran a secret school for girls and women. In 2003, she made international news, as you heard in one episode of our show, for denouncing the warlords that were making up the Karzai government. This made it so that she had to travel with bodyguards for the rest of her days. She was the subject of intimidation, death threats, and several assassination attempts. After her speech at the Loya Jirga, she then ran for MP and won. But even as a member of parliament, she continued to rail against the warlords and the US and NATO occupation. Eventually, this resulted in Malalai being suspended from parliament. Thanks to the return of the Taliban, she's currently living outside of the country. But she took the time to speak with us. I've edited the interview lightly for clarity and length. But without further ado, here's our conversation with Malalai Joya. Malalai, you were born into an era of one of the many wars in Afghanistan back in the 1980s. What was it like to grow up in Pakistan across the border in the refugee camps during that time?
Yes, when I was 4 years old, I have to leave our country with my family because of the war. Then we went to Iran and then Pakistan, that there are like millions of other Afghan. We lived in a very bad economic situation that the Afghan refugee, their children had no access to education, and there was their families face different kind of discrimination and problems. They suffer from joblessness, and some works that they find they have to work very hard and receiving little amount of money. And even in these refugee camps, the progressives who left Afghanistan in the secular, their life was more in danger because these camps run by extremist fundamentalists who created, nourished, and supported by U.S. In the past, and received guns and money from through the Iran dictator regime, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia financial support, etc. So they invested on them since Cold War on these terrorists. And when the progressive went to these camps, refugees camps, their life was in danger. Even these fundamentalists like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, this fascist man, had a camp that named Shamshato and Jaluzay, that there in these camps was doing massacre the progressives. And many other examples that we have, that they don't look to refugees in these camps even as a human, look to as a second-class human citizens. And still, when you see the wave of asylum seekers, the root causes of all the problem is the occupation and fundamentalism. That because still our people, they have to leave the country and they are going to the foreign countries just to survive. But they are facing different kind of discrimination and especially inhuman behavior in the countries like Iran, that they face from this dictator regime, to Greece, to Pakistan, and the wave of asylum seeker itself is another strong evidence of the wrong policy of the Western governments in Afghanistan.
I think Americans are very familiar, at least on a basic level, with the Taliban. Fundamentalist, oppressive, patriarchal. But the villains in your book, even more than the Taliban, are the warlords, the Mujahideen leaders who then became government officials, who had all started and taken part in the Civil War in the 1990s. Who were these men, and what was that Civil War period like?
During the Cold War, that our people, they fight against Russian invasion and their puppet. On that time, it was difficult for our people to recognize these terrorists because they also called themselves, these fundamentalist warlords, Mujahideen. While all of the people, most of the people of Afghanistan who fight it against Russia and their puppets, they also call themselves Mujahideen. So when Russia, the Soviet Union failed in Afghanistan and their puppet regime collapsed, at that time, people was so happy that they got the freedom of our country, and the Mujahideen became the winner. But very soon they recognized that their Mujahideen divided to two parts. I mean that these extremist fundamentalist warlords who pretending, acting that we are Mujahid, they show their bloody nature, bloody hands to our people as they start civil war in Afghanistan. Each of these extremist fundamentalists, they wanted to come in power and they belong to different ethnic. And first they destroyed our national unity in Afghanistan. And then what they did, they banned women from their rights. They raped even young girls and grand old mothers, and they committed massacres, countless massacres. And they looted our museum. They cut the breast of the woman and even beat nails on the head of the people. And let me to give you more example of their brutalities, that to know better about their nature, how they are similar like the Taliban. And these fundamentalists warlords banned the music and the women from the sports club, and they stole our precious stones, and they burned people in the container. They did massacre. They take out the eyes of their opponent when they arrested. And they, alone in Kabul, there is report more than 65,000 people they killed in Kabul. They burned our libraries, and while they are saying we are Muslim, even they burned Quran. And any opponent wise against them, they brutally killed them. They destroyed our Afghan National Army and police army. Same like the Taliban, they banned women to go out without male relative, and even banned women to use perfume, and they have to use hijab, force them, and forced marriages. And Islam was a tool like Taliban in their hands that to mix with politics, use it against people, especially women, and different kind of atrocities and crimes they committed against our people. That they dropped hundreds of rockets in Kabul. That they committed different kind of crimes against minority ethnics that similar like Taliban. And if we call that period what the crimes that they committed from 92 to 96 when they come in power, the small Holocaust even is not enough to explain. So these killers, when they were in power, U.S. created another terrorist group named Taliban, as they also American project. So when Taliban came in power, people thought maybe Taliban better than warlord, because people didn't know about their nature first time they come in power. But very soon they recognized that they have no difference, and mentally they are same, only names are different.
In your book, you write, quote, "As most people are no doubt aware, the Taliban strictly forbade any formal education for women and girls. But the educated and proud people of Herat, in the west of the country where you're from, simply would not tolerate it." End quote. As a young woman, you enlisted to become an underground teacher in Afghanistan under the Taliban. What was that job like? What were the risks?
Yes, when terrorist Taliban came in power, first act they did banned taking off of the population from going to school and having education. Same like again when they came in power, they did the same. It means that their nature not changed, and later I can give you more example. So it was very dangerous. It was risky to be underground teacher, as the burqa, which always I call it a symbol of oppression, like a threat for the life body. But this disgusting burqa at that time, same like today, gave safety to the woman, especially activist woman, a teacher woman like us, that and carried books under the burqa, and I was teacher for elementary classes and also for till the high school. And it was, in the meantime, as it was not easy, but it was full of the joys and hopes and bravery, and these memories that I have, that I found out how slowly people joined me, the neighbors, and it shows they are eager to the power of the education, their belief to the education. As we believe that we're in a country that people do not have education, do not write and read, impossible to bring democracy, especially the women of the population do not have education. They don't know their identity. As society without education, to tell you better, is like a dead society. Anyway, but these fundamentalist warlords and the Taliban, both of them, these extremists, and now ISIS, that only the names are different, and they are same project of one country to say better and other imperialistic powers, that they are afraid of the education, power of the education, especially power and role of the woman. Educated woman. That is why they are against, because they think that if the woman to be arrested in the house, to be silenced, to not be active, women to be non-educated, then maybe it is easier for them to control off of the other population that they are the men. Anyway, but they just don't look to women as a human. They believe that women are only to be used to satisfy their sexual lust and bear children. Anyway, but fortunately, the women of Afghanistan in the past until today, in different ways, show their resistance. They are eager to the education, their bravery. That I remember a woman on that time that when the Talib beat with lashes, take out the burqa and try to convince the Talib, yelling against Talib bravely in the street, and was saying, "I'm like your mother, and look that burqa, despite having burqa, and beat it because you don't have a mahram with your male relative." And many examples of the bravery of the woman, that how they, for example, people offering their houses as a clandestine, as an underground school. Same like today, I receive a lot of message from Afghans that we are ready, that our daughters could go to the underground schools, continue their education if you help us. And these are a source of hope for the bright future of Afghanistan.
I think it may surprise some Americans to hear that, as you say in your book, things became even worse after the Taliban fell from power, as bad as they were. Someone like you, of course, was well aware of that. And that was because of, in your view, it was the return of the warlords, this time backed by the full military might of the United States. So what should people understand about the post-2001 government, the Karzai U.S. NATO government in Afghanistan?
Yes, you know that our country after 9/11 has been occupied by US and NATO, who followed the footsteps of the US in the past 20 years, which was war crime and it was a warmonger policy. Huge difference between the government of the US and the great people of the US. And if the government of the US, they did bombing and they killed our people, they did massacres, they supported the sworn enemies of democracy, peace, and justice, I mean these warlords. But the great people of the US always, they supported our people, but unfortunately, most of them, they didn't know the truth, because the war of Afghanistan was not only propaganda war, military war. Sorry, it was not only military invasion, it was propaganda war too. And through mainstream media, they put dust in the eyes of the great people of the US and other NATO countries. And I'm sure if they know the truth, they did not sit silent, and their government was not easily for them to continue to their barbarism, war crime against our people. In fact, in the past 20 years, our people is squashed between three enemies. From the sky, occupation forces, they did bombing and killed our people, even did bomb our wedding parties, funeral gathering, they did bomb, and always the victim was the innocent people. They were saying to the dear people that we are there to fight against terrorism. In fact, practically, they supported, empowered directly and indirectly the terrorism in Afghanistan. Terrorism itself was a strategic tool in the hand of the US and NATO to use it against our people and wage their war, not only in Afghanistan, what they did in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, in Libya, and now look what is happening in Ukraine. When you hear the news, the history of Afghanistan is repeating there. And in Afghanistan, for example, only few massacres that they did, I will say that the listener just to judge themselves if they are Afghan, what will be their reaction. For example, in my own province, in Farah, they did bomb, and even publicly through media, they says they used white phosphorus, and 150 people in one day were killed. In Kunduz province, for example, American troops did bombing. In Kunduz, German troops said that 90 people, media said that they were killed. In Helmand, 52 people were killed, the media gave report. In Azizabad of Herat, 90 people were killed, 60 of them was children. And Kandahar, another massacre that they committed, that they did not wrote here exactly, but countless of people were killed. In Nangarhar, 52 people were killed, women and children. And in Kunduz, again, 42 people were killed. And many examples like this that they in Nangarhar, for example, the wedding party that they did, 47 people were killed when they did massacre. And this list can be prolonged. It's enough when you see the Professor Mark Herald website that dedicated his time, at least some become document, but it is not enough. While the real statistic is much higher. Usually through mainstream media, they decrease the civilian casualties, call them terrorists sometimes in the name of so-called terrorists that they are fighting or they killed, but ordinary people was the victim. So same like when they are saying good war, bad war through their media, Iraq is bad war, bad war, Afghanistan, good war, while we have many things in common. And the last one I can say, this is the hero, not only hero of Afghanistan, hero of the millions around the world. The WikiLeaks founder name, sorry, can you help me?
Julian Assange.
Yes, Julian Assange. You know, Julian Assange is living in the hearts of millions in the world, including Afghan people, by telling the truth. And he himself exposed the crimes, the war crime of the U.S. administration. And many examples like this, that we believe that this was not war on terror, and this was not democracy. They betrayed democracy, and catastrophic situation of women was very good excuse for US and NATO to occupy Afghanistan. And their last betray to say, or their last treason to Afghan people was that recently, before they are leaving Afghanistan, they launched rockets from the airport to the residential area that 9 people were killed, and some of them were kids. And 40 people in the airport, they were killed. Some of them on the airplane, wing of the airplane, that looking at flying, and they fall down and they brutally were killed. And many, many examples of the barbarism of the U.S. government in Afghanistan, that the troops was tool in the hand of this non-democratic regime, warmonger regime, that they send them for war crime. And I believe they not only betrayed Afghan people, but they betrayed their own people too. They betrayed the blood of their soldier, and they betrayed their people by who lost their dear ones in 9/11 tragedy, the terrorist Taliban who killed them and again brought the terrorists in power. And this was, in fact, they betrayed their taxpayer money in the past 20 years. The money is stolen from the pocket of their own people, sending to these terrorists. In fact, the biggest treason of the U.S. To Afghan nation is the submission of Afghanistan to the Taliban, that through a shameful deal helped by the puppet regime of Ashraf Ghani and Karzai. And this same treason was done 20 years ago in Afghanistan after 9/11, when U.S. and NATO replaced the barbaric regime of the Taliban with these fundamentalist warlords, that some of them only physically changed, but mentally same, wearing suit and tie, come in power, and continue to their barbarism against our people.
So with all this said about the corruption of the government and the, as you put it, the real equivalence, in your view, between the U.S. government, or rather the U.S.-backed government of warlords and the Taliban. All that said, you ran for public office, first as a delegate on the Loya Jirga and then for parliament. And in your book you write, quote, "Any land ruled by the gun and powerful interests, where democracy is only a mirage," quote, "In any land ruled by the gun and powerful interests, where democracy is only a mirage, it is nonetheless crucially important to use whatever rotten institutions that exist to tell the truth to the public," end quote. What was it like to run for office and to hold office at that time? And would you say you still believe what you wrote back then?
You know, my experience is that if, for example, in the past 20 years, there was chance for progressive activists in Afghanistan, men and women, huge positive changes come in the society. Look, for example, in this society that always they are raising this propaganda, this is patriarchal society, I don't know, this is male-dominated society where the women, they themselves don't want to play their role. A lot of propaganda like this, or the men don't allow them. Well, I was in a very young age. I was only 25 years old that I became elected. When I ran in the election, it was like not like the so-called election that we experienced in the past 20 years that our people call a selection, because behind of the closed doors, as they wish, they counted the votes of the people. But the election that I became winner, it was somehow opposite. I mean that all the boxes was open. It was they were counting in front of the people the votes. So during my speech, I recognized from their welcoming that I'm the winner. And when we saw the ballot boxes, my boxes become full of the ballots. This is how, as a high winner, high vote, with high votes, I become the winner. And when I come to Lojirga, and the first time I saw the criminal faces of these terrorists, and then who I heard a lot about their crimes and barbarism against our people. Since I was refugee in Pakistan in the past, when I was in high school, in the morning I was a student, in the evening I was teacher for literacy courses. I heard a lot of suffering stories from my students. Some of the widows still they are waiting for their husband. They even did not give the dead body of their husbands, and some orphans that they share their suffer story of how they lost their father or their some members of their family. One mother I know that 7 member of her family, he lost 7 of his sons, and many examples like this. So in Lojirga 2003, we made constitution on that time that I saw that how they control Lojirga, and they want to put dust in the eyes of the people around the world, pretending acting like Democrat, like progressives, but with bloody hands. And that is why I couldn't tolerate, and I thought that the Tribune of Lojirga is the best chance if I become able to have this opportunity to tear their mask, not only for Afghan people, because there was international attention to the great people of the world. So that is why I tried a lot, and it has a long story. Then how I became able, it was difficult to have chance to speak. Finally, I got this chance, and you hear that speech. But that time, my life fell from the social activism to the politics. And then when I come back home, then I couldn't have office like the past. I couldn't, while in the past also to compare before Lojirga, I had problem. For example, when I was trying to open the clinic, they are that giving free medicine for even a small amount of people because we didn't have enough money. It was not a big project. But these local warlords, they did not allow me that to open the clinic. Then people stand up with me, and we opened that clinic. You can read some memory in my book. Anyway, but when I had a speech in Lojirga 2003, then I became famous in Afghanistan, not only internationally. Then in Afghanistan, it became more dangerous that they even couldn't have office. 2 times they attacked my office. Several times they did assassination attempts to kill me as they could not make me silence. Then people asked me that Malalai ran for the presidential election. After that election, presidential election came in 2005, and then parliamentary election. But this as example, I am telling you that how people show that they are not agree with this propaganda that they are saying it is a male-dominated society, or people they are trying giving bad views about our culture, about our people to the great people of the world. I mean those who are in power. So people even didn't saw the number of my age, even didn't look my gender. Even they were saying, Malalai, give your scarf to us, some of the men. We give our head, our hat, our hat to you to show their sympathy, to their solidarity, support. And they always share, come to the office, share their problem, asking our advice about different issues to show their support. And the campaign of my parliamentary campaign is a source of full of the memories that which is source of inspiration and hope, not only for me, I'm sure for many, not only in Afghanistan, around the world, because it shows that people in different ways show their belief in democracy and women's rights. And imagine when these people, brave people, go to the vote and they lost their finger, they cut their finger, or for example, cut their ears, and they become punished or were killed. They did suicide attack. But despite of this, they are ready to vote. This is democracy that people should. But the problem is those who are in power, all the boxes in the hands of them, as they wish, they count. They betrayed the votes of the people, and they speak with the people with the language of the gun. And they are corrupt people. We have this famous saying: "It's not important who's voting; it's important who's counting." And regarding my winner, and that how I become one. how I became winner second time in 2005 because I was famous. And I thought when people asked me, Malalai ran for the parliamentary election, I thought with myself that if I become winner, then I will be the voice of these voiceless people in these non-democratic houses, as I call it, so-called national house, because impossible that to be democratic election under the shadow and control of these warlords, drug lords, and these corrupt people. But if I do not become winner, then the corruption will be clear, not only for our people, for the world, because I was famous that time. Then what they did to show their power to me and to my supporters, to Pharaoh people, they till the last night I was the first winner, and the last night immediately they announced tomorrow that I become the second winner, and the first winner was a person who rest of his life living in outside in Western country, and even during campaign shaking the hand of people with the glaives. Imagine. And people, this landlord man didn't like him. So anyway, for me, important to be in this so-called national house, that to be the voice of our people there, as we have this famous saying, you have to go to the tiger cave to hunt tiger
Cubs.
The baby of tiger. So this is what I was thinking, that to be the voice of these voiceless people, especially suffering women, oppressed women inside of the so-called national house that you saw from the first day they turned off microphone, that there was not even elementary part of democracy till the time that they, as a political conspiracy, used one of my speech that censor against me through non-democratic media, and it was easy for them because majority seats belongs to the warlords, drug lords. Even one member of this so-called national house was Talib. So they voted for me and expelled me, despite national international condemnation not allow me to be back there. And then from that day till today, I continue to the struggle and doing resistance against them.
At one point, you got a one-on-one meeting with the former president, Hamid Karzai. And I found this story and its aftermath in your book to be very interesting. Could you tell our listeners this story? What was it like meeting Karzai? You describe his crocodile tears.
Yeah, meeting with Karzai, that as he was acting like a Democrat person, progressive person, while he himself was one of those Western technocrats like Ghani and these other, that they are puppet of the U.S. government. And just they try to implement U.S. warmongering policy in Afghanistan. So when I had a meeting with this puppet man, our people call him the third Shah Shuja of Afghanistan. First Shah Shuja was when British in the past occupied Afghanistan. Shah Shuja was a brutal king, puppet of British. The second Shah Shuja, the people call Taraki, the puppet of the Soviet Union. And the third Shah Shuja, they call Karzai and Ghani. You know that these they are the third Shah Shuja, Karzai, because the third puppet, it means that. Shah Shuja, I told you, was the name of the puppet king in the British time. So this third Shah Shuja, when I had a meeting, in this meeting, unfortunately, they not allow the camera that I had. I wanted to have photo and record our meeting, but not allowing it. It is clear that why they don't want. And then was pretending like to be very kind for me and supportive for me, and told me that what you had, I heard about your speech. You do not think that I did not understand what you said. And then I told him clearly, I said that the history and our people will never forgive you for doing compromise with these warlords. I criticized clearly and with examples. And he preferred to be silent, listening more to me, that more time I was talking when we had time meeting. And then during my meeting, even was trying to show like sympathy. Sometimes the eyes become full of the tears. And then I told him, Yeah. It is like crocodile tears. Even once I remember was acting when was signing the strategic agreement with the US, he was rejecting and acting like a national person, a nationalist person, and was saying that no, I do not sign, and then cried and made a very emotional speech. Once in Parliament, the first Parliament start made emotional speech. Anyway, I want to say that our people do not be deceived by these crocodile tears of these puppets. And also, I told him in the meeting that why you sent Bashir Baghlani, this criminal, to be governor of Farah province. The people say that maybe you sent him to kill me because he also belonged to Gulbuddin fascist party. And this man, that much criminal that even they could not send him by the real name that he had. They changed the name. His name was Bashir Baghlani. They changed the name, made Yusuf Baghlani, And Baghlan people hate him. He's famous for his crime and barbarism in Afghanistan. And then I said to Karzai that I came from one of my supporter house now meeting you that last night a woman of this house when watching the TV she told me that you have meeting with Karzai. Please tell to Karzai that you are giving a medal, a award to his warlord like Ismail Khan, this criminal. And what is the difference between you and the warlords while you are supporting these warlords, these criminals? Then he had no answer, told me, no, I didn't give, and mentioned another warlord name who was minister. The name was Kanuni, who was Minister of Education, and stole $25 million of the education budget, imagine. Then he was giving this award to another warlord like Ismail Khan. I said, no matter, but they are your ministers, that minister of your government is warlords. Anyway, then I said about his wife that why your wife do not play the role as a first lady of the country because for half of the population it's important. And I should tell the story of the Malika Suraya, the king of Amallah Khan wife that who tried to bring reforms in the past and who appeared in the society first time with mini job and made a magazine for the woman, and some students sent to the Turkey and France, to German, other countries for higher education, and made some women organizations, and first time in the history of Afghanistan, women appear without the veil in the society, and a lot of progressive changes and reforms brought on that time. And I said, she must be like Malika, like Queen Suraya, wife of Amallah Khan. But unfortunately, this meeting just was like a waste of the time. Same when I had meeting with his wife, he told me, you can meet with my wife. Then when I had meeting with wife was also the same. Unfortunately, they tried to show their sympathy and support to me, but I told them I'm a person. You must, my voice is the voice of these suffering people. You should listen to them if you are different from these warlords. Anyway, with the passage of time, it has been proved that they were a bunch of puppets and they shared the crimes of the warlords, in fact, indirectly by doing compromise with them.
So, of course, the administration of George W. Bush invaded in 2001. After he left office, President Barack Obama was elected, and he talked about pursuing the right war, the good war in Afghanistan. But by most accounts, he didn't achieve victory because the war kept going into the presidency of Donald Trump. Between Bush and Obama and Trump, what do you find as far as the American approaches of these different presidents? Do you find them that different, or do you find that they all pursued something pretty similar?
I believe that the nature of all is same. Only the names was different. Maybe their faces, because one was black and the other was white. Anyway, but all they had symbolic role, and they have symbolic role. I believe that the foreign policy of the U.S. is not like to make for the short term. For the long term, the CIA is making and implementing by their tools. Their tools and the hand of their foreign policy, disgusting warmonger policy, that just by bringing a little changes to deceive their own people. But they can, for a while maybe they are able to deceive their own people, but not forever. But they never can deceive the people of the other country, especially the countries where they waged a criminal war. For example, in Afghanistan, we saw that how during campaign, for example, Obama was saying, okay, we will remove the troops from Afghanistan, etc. But you saw that the first day when became the winner, he surged more troops in Afghanistan, which brought more bloodshed and more war crime in Afghanistan. And same, for example, to Biden and racist fascist Trump. Both the Trump was talking about withdrawal of the troops, but then this Biden put it in practice, the so-called withdrawal. While I believe they did not lift Afghanistan, it was a so-called exit. And later I can focus about this. Anyway, the nature of all these presidents are same. Only the name and figures are different, and they are doing what the U.S. warmongering administration policy want, implementing in other countries.
So for 20 years, since the war began, over 20 years, you have been a critic of the war. You've called for the withdrawal of American troops and NATO troops, while also, of course, being completely opposed to the Taliban. The U.S. did withdraw in 2021, but I get the sense you're quite critical of that withdrawal as well. And I'm wondering what you wish had happened instead, and if it was possible for this to go down any other way.
You mean that what the U.S. should do?
Yeah.
Yes. If they were honest, while they are not, we cannot expect this from the warmonger. But when they left, we wished that honestly they left and they take their projects. These bunch of puppets, the warlords and the Taliban and these corrupt Western technocrats. All these bunch of killers, looters, misogynists, terrorists were themselves, because they created, nourished, empowered these terrorists. The godfather of all these terrorists is the U.S. government and other imperialist powers who followed the footsteps of the U.S. in Afghanistan. So it was easy if they left Afghanistan, honestly, but they never want to leave Afghanistan because of the geopolitical location of Afghanistan. That we are in the heart of the Asia, because our neighbors are China, economically growing fast. Our neighbor is Russia, military growing fast, a military power in Asia. And through Afghanistan, they not only control Asian powers, they easily have access to the gas and oil of the Central Asian republics, and through Afghanistan, making hundreds and millions of dollars through dirty business of opium. They changed our country to the center of the drug, and they are looting our rich resources that we have, uranium, copper, mine, etc. So they are there for their own evil goals that they have, not to bring values like democracy, justice, peace, or to get rid of our people from these germs, these COVID, like COVID Taliban or COVID warlord. Anyway, they are there for their own agenda and disgusting plan that they have, and not only they betrayed the Afghan people, they betray values like democracy, they betrayed the value like peace, while peace without justice is meaningless. The only demand of millions of Afghans is justice. If we want to bring democracy and these other values in Afghanistan. They lost their dear ones, and never forget, and not only our people never forgive, and our history will never forget, has been recorded in the history of Afghanistan. So the only solution for the disaster situation of Afghanistan is the progressive sources, men and women, individuals, some parties, but more than that, the unity of Afghan people inside of Afghanistan and outside that should join their hands together to fight for the liberation of our country. And just one example I'm giving that for that, as always I was saying, no nation can donate liberation to another nation. Liberation should be achieved by the people themselves. And the example that now I'm going to give is about that role of the U.S. Policy that for example, in Afghanistan, after this fake withdrawal or so-called withdrawal, that only, as I says, only the shape of occupation a little changed. I mean, the donkey is same, only saddle changed, but the nature is still continue. One puppet went, another puppet come back. And imagine, 1 year ago, they handed over the destiny of suffering Afghan people to the terrorist Taliban. But regarding the movement happened in Iran against dictator fascist regime of Iran, Linda Thomas Greenfield, you may know her, that the representative of U.S. to the UN praised the courage of the Iran woman. But 1 year ago, the government he represents handed over the women and girls of Afghanistan to the terrorist group like Taliban. In fact, as I said, that committed the biggest crime in the human in the history of mankind. Anyway, to compare how hypocrite. There, for example, because the dictator regime faced with the resistance of these people acting like a Democrat, okay, we support the Iranian movement, woman movement, but how about Afghanistan, that we have many things in common? The nature of Taliban and warlord is similar like the nature of the government of Iran, dictator regime of Iran. Only the name are different. We have many things in common. In both countries, women are the most victim. In both countries, Islam is a tool in the hand of these misogynist terrorists that mix with politics used against women. But you are acting of so-called helping hand to Iranian people, but how about Afghan? That is why my message always to great people of the Iran is that look at your neighbor, not all the other country, at least your neighbor like Afghanistan. Where U.S. interfered, they pushed us from the frying pan into the fire. They doubled our sorrows. And again, I says, only a nation can liberate themselves. The nation who pose themselves as liberators to others will lead them into slavery, what they did in Afghanistan and many other countries.
Off air, we mentioned the banking freezes that the U.S. has imposed on the funds of the Afghan government, which is, of course, now the Taliban. But you pointed out to me that there is apparently at least millions of dollars, not quite the billions that are frozen, but millions that may still be going to the Taliban from the U.S. government. And this was reported by NBC and others, a U.S. watchdog. And we include that detail in the show.
Yeah, the U.S. has imposed banking freezes and other so-called sanctions that have hurt the people of Afghanistan, while they are funding the Taliban to the tune of the 14 million a week to create a supposedly so-called all-inclusive government. The only person who damages the ordinary people, acting we are against Taliban, but in the meantime funding them in the name of the so-called humanitarian support. Of course, these money go to the Taliban. And the banking freeze, what they did, who damaged the ordinary Afghan people, not their puppets.
Malalai Joya, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. It was an honor to do this interview.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.